Today we are sitting in an uncertain time. The COVID-19 has evidently shredded the fabric of society, economic and culture to an extent that plunges the populace into unprecedented depth of disturbance. Governments, international organizations, art institutions, and private sectors are coming together to strengthen their strategies to support, shape, and sustain the creative industries. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to our fifth webinar, Art Connect Us. And this week, we are extremely delighted to collaborate with the UNESCO Regional Office of Eastern Africa under the ZeeArts movement. And our theme of today is Global Initiative to Support Creative Industry. My name is Zaahirah, I'm the founder of ZeeArts, and today I will be the moderator of this exciting panel discussion. According to a UNESCO report launched in 2018, the creative economy is made up of cultural and creative industry sectors that generate annual revenues of 2,250 billion USD and a global export of 250 billion USD. According to recent forecasts, these sectors represent around 10% of global GDP in the coming years. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the whole world, plunging the global economy into whole recession. This estimate shows that 5 to 25 million jobs will be eradicated. Lockdown measures around the world have directly impacted the creative sectors and reducing the diversity of cultural expression. Travel restriction, cancellation of art fairs, conferences, and other initiatives have been deeply affected. However, digital technologies have dramatically changed the cultural and creative industries. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to our experts in the industry, coming from diverse backgrounds and countries, to share their experience and expertise, as well as the global initiative happening to enforce the creative industry for a better future. So let me introduce you to our speakers today. So you can just raise your hand wherever I say your name so people can see you. So I have the great privilege to introduce you to Karalyn Monteil. She's the Regional Advisor for Culture at the UNESCO, she's the Regional Advisor for Culture at the UNESCO Regional Office of Eastern Africa in Nairobi, Kenya. She's the head of culture unit since January 2016 and is responsible for implementing the UNESCO cultural program in 13 countries, including Comor, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Madagascar, Mauritius, Rwanda, Seychelles, Somalia, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. The area of expertise includes museums and cultural heritage in the African region and supporting the development of national cultural policies. Welcome, Karalyn, on board. Our second speaker, she's a well-known figure in the Middle East region. She's the former editor-in-chief of Harper Bazaar Art and Harper Bazaar Interior, a role she had since January 2015. Her writing has been published in the New York Times Stars magazine, Bloomberg Business Week, Canvas, ArtNet, News, Press, BBC, Arab News, Gallery, Wallpapers, and the National Art News, and the Business Fashion. Please help me to welcome Rebbeca Anne Proctor. Hi, Rebbeca. Our third speaker also is a well-known figure in the UAE. Khalil Abdulwahid is an artist, activist, and worked as the director of the Fine Art Department at Dubai Culture and Art Authority. In addition, he serves as the chairman of the Emirates Fine Art Society in 2009. Khalil also curated 30 Emirates Fine Art Society annual exhibitions at the Sharjah Art Museum, while working as an active member on the advisory board of the Department of Visual Communication at the American University of Dubai. He was one of the panelists on the Sheikh Manal Young Artist Award in 2012. Khalil holds several awards. He's an avid supporter of ZeeArts and the art community in the UAE. It's a great pleasure to have you today, Khalil, with us. Welcome on board.
Thank you.
And our last speaker today is Mr. Kudus Mirza, from all the way to Pakistan. So Kudus is also an artist, an art critic, and an independent curator. He's a professor and the head of Fine Arts Department at the National College of Art, Lahore. Kudus has shown extensively in numerous prestigious group exhibitions held in Pakistan and the UK. He also curated a number of exhibitions in Pakistan, UK, and India. Editor online magazine Art Now Pakistan, Mirza is also the co-author of books 50 Years of Visual Arts in Pakistan. Thank you for joining us, Kudus. Our last speaker was, we were supposed to have Mr. Nanda Narayanan, the head of creative industry from Economic Development Board of Mauritius, but unfortunately he couldn't join us now. Probably he will join us later during the discussion. He had an emergency that he needs to attend. So now let's start our wonderful conversation. Karalyn, may I start with you, please? As the regional advisor of culture at the UNESCO and your robust position in leading 13 countries, can you tell us a little bit more how your role has been impacted during the pandemic and what are the initiatives that you are focusing to sustain the creative industry in these 30 African countries?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to be on this panel today and to discuss this important topic. So as the regional advisor based in Nairobi, covering these 13 countries of East African region and the Indian Ocean Islands, I'm actually usually traveling a lot. Maybe once or twice a month, I'm on the ground meeting with the partners and overseeing the project. So of course, since COVID, all of our travel has been restricted and a lot of the monitoring and the coordination and initiatives that we've been doing have moved online. So basically, I've been trying to follow what our headquarters has really put out as the COVID strategy, and then also adapting it to the context here on the ground. So just last September, UNESCO had convened a global meeting of all of the ministers of culture around the globe. And they had put forth their priorities and their needs. And we followed that up after COVID in April with another global meeting of all of these ministers of culture who told us how culture sector were impacted in their countries, what measures they were taking, and what they needed from UNESCO. So based on that, we also carried out needs assessments based in each country, how everything from their World Heritage sites to their museums to their intangible cultural heritage, how all of these different aspects of culture were being affected. And you can see on UNESCO's website, we have what we call a COVID tracker for culture, and it shows all the different initiatives that have been launched around the globe. So we have been doing a few online initiatives, like we have one called the Don't Go Viral campaign, where we're working with musicians mostly to raise awareness about COVID-19, to help fight disinformation, to really share prevention measures and other things that can take place. And that's been really successful and has really shown how artists and musicians can really be spokespersons and ambassadors for these important messages around the world. We've also been working on these ResiliArt campaigns and organizing artists to find out how they've been affected, and working to follow up on different initiatives that the artists have put forward. And so those are some of the main things we've done. We mostly have been doing webinars online, looking at how can we develop project documents to respond to the COVID crisis. So whether it be getting online resources, we noticed that a lot of East African museums and World Heritage sites and others, they really don't have an online presence. And with students needing to learn more online, we're trying to see how we can support getting more online resources and education resources, distance resources. And we're trying to see how we can help countries who want to have funds for artists who are out of work. So these are some of the areas we've been focusing on.
Thank you very much, Karalyn. Rebecca, I'm a bit curious to know how, from a journalist perspective, have your role been impacted during this pandemic? And now, if everything moves online, I'm sure there has been a dramatic change. Can you tell us a little bit more about this transition?
Yes, well, thank you again for inviting me to speak. I'm a big fan of, obviously, I've been reporting in the Middle East, and I'm a big fan of Africa. And I traveled extensively until recently throughout East Africa. And I obviously have not been traveling for the last, since March 1st was my last trip to Saudi Arabia. And I guess that would be the biggest impact, I think, for me. And, travel as a journalist, particularly in this region, I thought was literally cornerstone. It was a sort of utmost necessity to my work as a reporter. I would be on a plane almost every week. There was a joke going around, it's like, where's Rebecca? Where's Waldo? Is she on a plane? And it was something that I was actually struggling with, because I think there's this desire that, as a journalist, you have to be in the field. You have to have that physical presence to the people you're speaking with, to the artwork. And I still believe it's a vital necessity, but I also believe, as I've experienced now, I've done a lot of reporting from, on Palestine, on Lebanon recently, from my home, from this screen. And so it has changed. I've been doing a lot more broadcasting. I was asked to go out and report, more or less, obviously I do a lot on art and culture, but on coronavirus and on, social and economic effects in the Middle East and Dubai, with my phone and a tripod. So that was basically, very new to me before I'd have a crew. And I think that this is a time, we're all reopened, but we're still in the middle of this pandemic. I think we're still feeling the trauma that it has brought out. And I'm trying, personally, I think this is maybe going to be your next question, but I've been trying to use my, my skills as a writer and as a journalist or a speaker to help connect and to help bring to the forefront important issues in particularly the Middle East and Africa. I am from America, but I probably won't be going home for a few months. But I think that this is a very important time to raise and to connect and to collaborate creatively.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Kudus, can you tell us from your role as an art critic and curator, can you share your experience with us during the lockdown? How did you experience it?
I think,
Kudus.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
I think my experience is just limited to this room during coronavirus. And first, it was very limiting and frustrating. And then I realized, well, this is how the time is going to change. Even I believe that there are various, because of the power struggle between different countries in the world, there are places you can go, there are places you cannot go. There are places which you cannot be at two places at the same time. But I think with the coronavirus, it's a kind of a blessing in disguise, because like being a Pakistani, it's very difficult to travel to India and look at an exhibition and review it. But I've been doing it in these weeks. I've been writing on Indian exhibitions, and I realized that kind of a freedom which I have now, and the possibilities which were already there, but I was never like inclined to explore them. Or I think at the same time, how the world is going to change, because the way people are working from their home, people have kind of really been, in my college also, classes are being conducted through home. And then I realized that these restrictions kind of a challenge for creative output as well. So probably these have kind of really changed the way of thinking. And I feel that probably there will be another way of exhibiting as well on online exhibition. And there have been examples, and people have been showing online as well. Maybe the work is going to be created online as well. So virtual will become the new real in I think in times, and this is somehow which is kind of really hard hitting, but it has kind of really changed the way of doing it. So I'm first of all, I was really frustrated, but I think now I've just like given up. I am really enjoying
You're used to it.
Yeah, not used to, but enjoying it, being at home.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Kudus. Khalil, you as an artist yourself, what do you think about how everything is moving online? I mean, we can see lots of online exhibition or growing organically now. What's your thought about it?
It's really interesting what's going on now actually in the world and with the artists. Definitely, like, you know, the online, it did play a big role of what's happening, like, you know, with the COVID. It did push everybody actually to go toward the technology and to get advantage of technology, like, you know, to promote their artwork, like, you know, to do sessions, either like, you know, through the Zoom that we are doing now over here, talk, workshop, promote their work, like, you know, doing the, like, you know, open discussion. All the stuff is being moved. Even like, you know, the exhibition itself is really interesting to see, like, you know, people, or to say, like, you know, the artists, how they start to use the digital platform to change the real exhibition to, like, you know, to digital exhibition. And for me, it was really interesting because I start to figure out, like, you know, wow, how the creative people start to use this tool and to be creative also digitally to exhibit their art shows. And the advantage, actually, let's say, like, you know, we have also an example in real life. We start to see not just individual, even there's a good number of galleries, they start to showcase their artworks or to have their show digitally. And it was really, for me, it catch me eyes, is to see the way they did exhibitions, not to have the artwork showing in the, like, you know, online, is actually to have the 3D platform. So a person can really feel, is he inside the exhibition area, and, like, you know, to see their artwork. And we have a good example for that. For example, like, you know, a Sakala Avenue, the good number of art galleries in Sakala Avenue, they did turn, I would not say, like, you know, 3D, it's more as, like, you know, visual, what's called the word is, I forgot the word, but let's say, like, you know, you feel like, you know, it's like, you know, you're living and seeing the artwork and the exhibition itself live.
Yeah, yes, that's right, Khalid. Thank you so much. We talk about it, and today we are celebrating one Resiliat in Mauritius, and for this initiative. Since the pandemic, we have heard a lot about Resiliat. Can you, Karalyn, elaborate a bit more on Resiliat and what is it about? What's the outcome so far?
Thank you. And I'm so glad that this debate can be part of the whole Resiliat movement that's been launched by UNESCO. So I had mentioned we had this Minister of Culture meeting in April, and on World Art Day, on the 15th of April, we had our very first Resiliat debate. And it was a global debate. We invited artists, performers from around the world to really talk about how they were affected and what were their recommendations to their governments. Jean-Michel Barr, we had people from all regions of the world. It was a really important debate, and that launched a series of now over 100 debates that have been organized nationally around the world. Here in the Africa region, we've had 30 different debates on this topic. And what's interesting is that we often have the Minister of Culture, representatives of the ministry online participating in it, and you have leaders in the creative industries, whether it be film or music, theater. Some of these are more thematic. I think you've been participating in one in the Gulf country focusing on female artists. So sometimes they're thematic, but the Resiliat debates really give a voice to the artists to show how they're impacted. I mean, artists were always vulnerable, But the COVID pandemic has really laid bare, how their livelihoods are impacted. And so as we've gone through these debates, the need for really legislation for protection on artists has really come forward as one of the main outcomes of these debates. And that led me to organize in 2 weeks on the 28th of July, we're organizing an African regional debate where we're going to focus on this need for legislation, for social, health, financial rights for artists. UNESCO has a recommendation, believe it or not, it dates back to 1980. But if you read it, it's as relevant as if it was written today. It is just talking about how artists' rights, need to be protected, how they need to be members, valuable members for a creative economy. So that's something that we're focusing on. But these ZeeArts, they didn't only talk about that. They also looked a lot at the digital environment and, rights with intellectual property rights, copyright. We also talked a lot about cooperation and networks. So I think these ZeeArt debates are going to continue beyond, the COVID crisis. We had been doing some physical meetings we were calling Create 2030 talks the past few years, looking at how culture contributes to sustainable development. But now with ZeeArt, it's really taken on its own form, and it's really exciting to see this relationship that wasn't always there between the government and the artists, the civil society, the communities, that this dialogue that starts through ZeeArt afterwards. For example, I organized one last month in Comoros, and the artists put together their recommendations outcome, presented it physically to the minister, who's now looking how can that influence his policy, his culture policy. So I think these ZeeArt debates are here to stay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we record it, it's online, so it's so much knowledge sharing, and we get to educate ourselves. And we were so lucky indeed. We have collaborated with the UNESCO GCC and Yemen office just 2 days back, where we had all the female GCC artists who were there and expressing their feelings and emotions, as well as opportunities during this pandemic. I think it's a blessing in disguise. Thank you so much, Karalyn. Just a quick questions for our audience who's watching us. You can ask our panelists questions. Just type your questions down in the Q&A tab. And after the debate, we will keep 15 minutes so you can interact with our experts today. Our next questions, I would like to ask Rebecca, as you have the power of writing, have you ever think, I know you've been doing lots, how this power can connect, create and celebrate global collaboration and exchange to sustain our creative industries?
Well, thank you. That's exactly what I feel is sort of my mission as a journalist. I think as a journalist these days, we have to use a variety of platforms, whether it be writing or video, obviously webinars like this, which is public speaking. And I really believe that more than ever. I was in the Congo. I just wrote a piece that's been published today. On an African girls' school in Kalibuka. It's a small village outside of Lubumbashi, and I visited in January. And this is a village that has, until recently, almost no access to water. The people don't even have electricity in their homes. And I went to, it's an all-girls school, and it's been basically, put together by a woman who's from Lubumbashi, who's also a former supermodel, Noella Cosadas. And when I was there, I engaged in some arts projects with the kids, and also a writing class as well. And I've written several articles about it, one which came out yesterday, but basically they have been incredibly affected by coronavirus, where there's been this whole debate in the US that I've been, US and obviously in other nations, about access to education online, should kids go back to school? And these children and these girls in this village don't even have that option. Lockdown ultimately is a privilege. So they don't have access to the Zoom calls or the sort of Zoom online teaching or education. And so through my article, through some of these pieces that I've been writing recently, I'm hoping to spread, the word and make people aware of some of these situations so that they can donate or get creatively involved. And that's where, I think these Zoom webinars come really handy, or the article or the speaking. It's the same in the Middle East. I am, I'm very attached to Lebanon. It was my first Middle Eastern country that I visited in 2007, so long ago, when I was studying in Paris. And, they're going through a complete collapse. And I think that's, as someone, I think I just saw a little question come up. Artists, my mother's an artist, and my father's a writer. And, having grown up in this artistic household, it's difficult to be an artist. You have to be very creative in terms of how you're making a living and how connecting people. But people, obviously, creatives are facing more and more difficulty. And especially in places like Lebanon. And I mean, that's just only one country out of many in the world. But I'm trying to, in the absence really of platforms, for them to sell their work, for them to connect, I'm trying to use, I guess, my writing and my knowledge of the region to connect people, virtually and globally. I think that's more important than ever. The power of word. We're living in an age of information and misinformation. We hear it every day. We're glued to the news, and yet we don't trust the news sometimes. And so it's not there's a power in those words and in the ability to connect people. But I believe if you do it from the heart, and if you do it really with the right intentions, this can help people in places that are completely devastated right now. And creativity for me is really the way forward. We need creativity more than ever right now. We need art and beauty.
Absolutely. And I think art remain a connector, a universal language that, brings solace to our heart and mind. And also, I think that art remains a catalyst for social change. I mean, and we need to support and endorse this initiative. What do you think about it from a journalist perspective?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yeah, that question came up today. There's an amazing exhibition that's just launched in the Middle East. Well, it's virtual, of course, right now. Virtual is good for me, but I think we still need the physical connection. It's we have to do a dance around the virtual and the physical, which is obviously happening.
Human interaction as well.
Yes, but the Middle East Institute in Washington has launched an amazing exhibition of photography called Lebanon Then and Now. And it's basically taking images by emerging and established Lebanese photographers from the Civil War to the present. And, they're so powerful, these photographs, but ultimately, the exhibition is hoping to raise the dialogue of social change, social justice through art, through photography. So these images, they're so beautiful, so powerful and upsetting, but by seeing them online, by allowing, a greater audience to see what's happening in Lebanon, this will hopefully bring about a dialogue that the Lebanese people are in dire need of, international dialogue in terms of what it means to have change and social justice. So yes, I think for me, these particularly, I feel very passionate about helping and being a journalist in this aspect. Here.
Thank you, Rebecca. Coming from the UAE yourself, Khalil, and having an important role in the art scene in Dubai, can you share some of the initiative that Dubai government has taken to help the creative industry to sustain in this part of the world?
I mean, interesting part if we talk about the COVID-19, what's happened through the, not just the Dubai government, in general, the UAE, there was some movement and there's some initiatives that happened. I'm talking from Abu Dhabi to Dubai to Sharjah and the rest of the country.
All the Emirates, yeah.
All the Emirates, plus it's not just the government entity, also the private sectors was involved and trying to have a role in that. And also there's some initiative or collaborations happen. We have some initiative that's happened between Dubai Culture and Jameel Art Center, some initiative that came up from Sakala Avenue. If we go back to Abu Dhabi, that we have Ministry of Culture and collaboration with a different entity also that you doing some initiative to support the artists. UAE Unlimited also is based in Abu Dhabi. So this great thing is this either we're talking about the government entity or private sectors that they have a role in art sectors. They know that they had also a role during the COVID-19 to do something, because there's a lot of not just the artists, even the small business had dealing with art. It did get a fact. It did slow their business or stop their business. So the creative economy, you don't want to really stop. It does somehow we do look at it, it does really, the creative economy is going back again to, in parallel with the economy was going on. When you have a strong economy, it does have a, positive or good impact on creative economy. But again, this sector is very important for the country itself. So and for the creative people is how to keep it enrolling. So the great thing, it did happen some initiative for the artists. So that's what we had. I was trying also to go back a little bit, when we mentioned about the digital platform, and Rebecca, when she said she mentioned a good point about all the news we hear. Sometimes we start to to believe what to believe in it, what not to believe in it. It did open a platform also is show me what is a kind of a good advantage of say the digital platform, and what can be a disadvantage. The advantage, it make it easier for all the people to communicate and to get source of information. But again, because it's open to everybody and anybody has an access to put whatever they want, it did somehow make it kind of negative to it did push the people not to get any source or any information you get. You have to search a little bit harder for it. It's restrained the platform of a digital world, and look at how much is is helping us, or it might be other way.
Great. Thank you, Khalil. We've now everything moved to online, and in the present circumstances, how do you see the future of galleries and
Hello.
art criticism? Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, all right. So Kudus, I'm turning to you. In the present circumstances now, with everything moving online, how do you see the future of galleries and you as an art critic and the curatorial practice evolving in the near future?
I think I feel that there are restrictions for us now because people do not really meet. So the kind of unexpected encounter with people, because when I'm online, I know that I'm talking to 4 people at this moment, and they're not going to be any 5th person or 6th person or another but in a gallery, in a physical sense, there are always unexpected encounters which really change. So somehow what Khalil and Rebecca was saying, that it is liberating, but yet it is kind of restricted as well. I can connect with people around the world, but I can connect to only those who I intend to, or those who plan to connect with me. So I think people are missing going to the galleries. Galleries are closed in Pakistan, but now some galleries have taken initiative and they are opening up spaces, keeping the precautions to social distance or whatever it is required. But I feel that with the change in the art world might create a change in the work of art as well. I'm really keen to see how artists are going to respond, and what are they going to continue with the similar kind of practices in their work, or the work are going to be their work are going to be changed, and if they're changed, in what way? Because I'm not talking about the size or the medium or the format, but the concerns. Will these concerns remain? Well, these concerns are going to be a passing experience, or this kind of a loneliness or solitary or what can say self-isolation is going to continue. And in my view, all artists are always in self-isolation. You are in your studio, or you are in your mind, or even writers or artists or any creative person is in self-isolation. So when the physical self-isolation comes, the burden becomes higher. And I think the system of art, how it is going to support the art system. So if it's opening up in the world, because the galleries in Pakistan, they're selling works or they're showing works all around the world. And so I believe everywhere it is happening. So it's a kind of a liberating as well, yet it is kind of confining. And as I spoke about writing, so I think the writings can be liberating for a person because it opens up different views. Yet you can't really see physical work. And I really love to see physical work, because art, it is like kind of seeing a human being and touching, not through your hands, but through your
Feel
eyes.
it, smell it.
Yeah, you through your eyes.
Yeah.
So I think that's something probably we are a generation which may cherish this memory for long.
Yes, you're right. Thank you, Kudus. Karalyn, do you see any opportunities coming up in the coming month or years, and how to enhance the creative sectors, especially in these 13 countries that you are responsible and leading?
Thank you. Yes, I think that first of all, this pandemic has really drawn a lot of attention, not only in East Africa, but around the world, of the value that people place on culture. People are turning to culture now as their own, whether it be through literature, through film, looking at things online. This is where we're finding our solace and our reinforcement. And I think this increased attention on culture, on the cultural and creative industries, is something that, you know, has marked people. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, this vulnerability of that sector has also come to light. And I think these ZeeArts debates that UNESCO has been organizing is ensuring that all around the globe, this is being recognized. So I think, based on this realization that we are going to have more informed culture policies, and I'm hoping through not only the debate that we're organizing, but through, you know, continued efforts, that we will start getting more protection for artists. I encourage everyone who's listening to just take a look at this 1980 recommendation of UNESCO concerning the status of the artist. It's really very visionary guidelines when you consider when it was written, and it's things, like I said, that are very pertinent today and that many artists around the world still don't have. I mean, in Europe, I heard Rebecca say she was living in Paris. I mean, it's different. They provide studio space. There's you know, unemployment benefits, you know, health benefits. It's not the same risk as an artist in Kenya. I know here where I live, we have a musician that went on concert tour. He's stuck in Copenhagen. Macadam, he's a very well-known, and so he's calling himself a COVID refugee, you know, and he's there, but he's, you know, I think more and more through our Don't Go Viral campaign, through these ZeeArts campaigns, we're seeing that we need to support artists around the world, and they're the source of our, you know, our well-being as people, but also of our creative economy. And I think one of the main things that we need to get the message out is this contribution of culture, this kind of dual role it plays, as, you know, for enjoyment, for pleasure, but also for economic development. And I think the more that we can show that, whether we need to get more statistics, whether we need to get it through policies and legislation, we need to show how culture contributes to the creative economy, to sustainable development. And I think when this message gets through, then we can get, you know, more budgets and more support for these industries. Right now, in almost every country, culture is always like the weakest ministry. It's not the most funded. And until we get that link, and sometimes I wonder why more countries don't link culture and tourism ministries. You know, why aren't they looking at this development aspect of culture? And when we start getting countries looking like that, then I think we'll be able to give more support to the artists, to the institutions, getting things going. So I do think there'll be an impact, and I'm hoping it will be a good one for the creative community.
As we said, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah.
We have a beautiful statement from an audience, Lucia Baule. She said that artists are essential workers because they heal our souls and spirits. So thank you very much, Lucia, from our audience now. Rebecca, hailing from America, studying in Europe, and now residing in the Middle East, with your expertise and experience, what advice would you offer to our emerging art writers who are watching us today? I know there are a few art writers in the audience, so what are the advice? What is your advice for them today?
Well, I think I'll give advice to the writers, but I guess, and also to the artists, because I feel just, you know, just to second what Karalyn's saying, it's something I feel very strongly about, that you know, the artists are, you know, depending on obviously where an artist or writer, anybody in the creative arts is residing right now, some people have more access to help and to funding than others. And I think that we're at a time where we actually, which is the silver lining, maybe the beauty of this, is that we are forced to collaborate. We have to work together. And if we don't work together, if we don't make changes in our life, then life or the universe will kick us in the butt. Excuse me to say like that. So I think that my advice is to never stop writing, to never stop painting, to never stop, you know, being creative, no matter what happens. I mean, I've profiled artists who've been, you know, in war zones or in refugee camps. You know, you can find creativity in the worst of circumstances. And, you know, I've always had this debate, because I have a degree in art history, and I have another degree when I studied in Paris in conflict resolution and, you know, political science. And I guess I've always, you know, I believe in the I believe in the creative spirit to help warring nations and people in need. But of course, you know, when you study international relations, when you study economics, the first needs are food, their water, their, you know, house.
Yeah.
But I do believe that art and culture is a human need. And someone told me in Ethiopia, when I was doing an article for ArtNet last summer, you know, and they were actually, it was funny because there was this sort of purported, there was this, well, it was sort of a coup, and the whole country had lost electricity. And I had never been in that situation before, but, you know, and they'd obviously, well, they cut the electricity just because of the situation that was happening. And a woman who I was interviewing at the time, she said, you know, we went through the famine in the 90s, we went through everything, but she said, if we don't have art, we might as well just die. If we don't have culture, we might not be, there's no point in living. And so that's, you know, from the sort of these situations, from the front lines, I think that, you know, the Lebanese and the Iranians, the same thing. I've just been or Saudi Arabia, and maybe I'll just give that last example. Sometimes when there's restrictions, when there's these, it doesn't matter whether it's government enforced or whether it's outside, you know, intervention in a country due to war, people find ways to create and to connect. And just to sort of end, since we're talking about how creativity can enhance the economy, Saudi Arabia, where I was going to almost every week until March, you know, they are opening up, but the 2030 vision is about diversifying the economy, weaning it off the dependence of crude oil by enhancing a creative economy. So there's a real push to do for Saudi to be creative. You know, I mean, there's always been an art scene, there's always been a lot of creativity, but even more now, there's a real push, and I found that really interesting. So yeah, I'd say my advice is to, you know, never give up, never lose hope, or never lose, you know, I don't, but I also think it's very difficult. It can be really hard when your confidence is a bit shattered due to the situation. I have a lot of friends who've lost jobs, and that's really hard, but you have to keep going on. You just have to keep, you know, and you have to collaborate. You have to work with people. You have to reach out for help, and you have to get mentors, you know, and we have to help. I think that's what's really important.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this powerful advice. Indeed, as we always say, the sky is the limit, so never give up. Kudus, how has this pandemic changed the notion of region identity and the market?
Well, as I spoke, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, as I talked earlier, that because my address is not being in Lahore, my address is just being on Gmail or in Facebook. That is my new identity. My physical identity is not relevant anymore. So I think in terms of what I discussed before, that going to India or going to Bangladesh or going to other places as well, you see visa restrictions, you see travel restrictions as well. And now with the COVID, I think it has become much more. But yet, people are, because the more restriction you put, the more people liberate themselves, the more people like kind of break those restrictions. And I think these restrictions have been a challenge now. So in region, I think artists have been collaborating, artists have been talking to each other, as we are talking, like we are at the same time in different geographical locations, yet we are connected, and our audiences also like that. So somehow I feel that this experience may in the future will change our notion about boundaries, about countries, about regions, about languages, about cultures. And I suppose it is going to be like people when they interact with each other, they realize that how common we are. We are on the same platform. So I think those biases, those prejudices, those boundaries are going to break. Somehow I feel that it is going to break in art as well. Now you don't really, in past, you come across those notions like art, French art or American art or British art or even Pakistani art or Indian art. You don't see that, you don't hear these things anymore. Art is not really kind of boundary based. Art is, or even like any other kind of boundaries are not really connected. And I feel that this is going to be a major change in the thinking, because technology is a way of changing our mind. And I feel that this is going to bring a positive change because of we can't really leave the house. So you might as well leave everything. We might leave the country, we might leave the region, we might leave our identity. So I feel that this is going to shift our notion about various things in future. I can't really predict, and I may not be able to advise people, I think, but I feel I can see that how things which are about language, about religion, about region, about country are, maybe once we come out of this pandemic, we realize those things are not important anymore.
Yes, you're right. And I remember a couple of days back, one of the panelists mentioned that this pandemic has brought us together. So we are all one now. Khalil, you are very active on the art scene in the UAE and been involved in many community projects. Do you have any advice that you would like to share to other artists, not only in the region, but around the world?
Sure, definitely. I mean, really what's going on now definitely is like, it's hard for all of us, but always anything is happening, there's a good side of it. I mean, I do encourage everybody, and encourage myself also, like, to look at the bright side of it, to like, definitely take advantage of it. Where do you encourage the artists? I mean, for sure, I mean, to push yourself to work, like, to keep working, look at the bright side. I do also want to agree also the point that Rebecca said, like, do collaboration, point together, we need to support each other, that's very important. But again, to keep the person to keep going, he need to like, feed himself with a positive energy. And like, that's one of the points that person has to look at the positive side of it. While we were discussing and talking, just I remember like, about technology we're talking, this one of the good thing is happening for all of us. For artists also, it's like, get advantage what's available. Be creative of like, what is possible to use. Technology did make a lot of things easier. It make all of us like, to meet in one, like, one platform, but I think all of us like, living in a different spot. Same thing with you, Zaahirah, like, the technology's been exist before. Never thought about, I mean, before, if you want to do any meeting, you come to my office, we meet in our office, or we meet in like, in the gallery or on the events. But now, like, we using technology, like, this, like, for example, the Zoom platform, and like, we're communicating and discussing, and like, if we have something to show it, also we're doing through all the digital platform. This would be very important for the artists to take part of it and think about it. Well, the other part or other point is one of the things it did actually made me to think personally about it as an artist, what I'm doing, what I used to do. And to rethink, like, what I'm going to do, how is going to be my role of, like, with, like, the COVID-19 is going on. there's a lot of things person can be like, to tell, like, to come out of it. One of the things is from my side, I've been thinking about, I said, okay, this is a great opportunity to do something documenting.
Yeah.
It's going to go back to the point, like, Rebecca just mentioned, like, how much the culture and art is very important. The artist rules also is playing, like, they are documenting their period of life. They, like, they have a lot of history through the artwork that showing to people the recording that it's making for people to be a kind of a resource. And like, after time, like, go back and, like, to get a lot of information. So it's a time also we're living. As human being, we never think about the time we are, like, living at the moment. Always we think about the bad time. We'll say, yes, we'll love to have these things. I wish we had that thing. One of the things I do advise also the people to like, to understand what to think about the moment or what to focus on it. Think ahead of time. Like, think if you're living, like, after 10 years, what the thing you wish you had, or you record, or you kept, or you did during this time. That will help the person to rethink, yes, it's a good time to do something, like, at the moment, and to be creative, or, like, how to document or to create artwork that relate about this period of life that we're living now. What we are living now is just temporary. Definitely, will, like, will go. So later will be past, and will be, like, a part of history. So as an artist, think about it, how you can play a big role or positive role during this time. And that would be my advice.
Thank you so much, Khalil. Now let me turn to our panelists before we tackle the questions from the audience. Do you have anything that you would like to add before we move to the questions from our panelists? No?
I think you're fine.
Kudus, I see your hand nodding now. Okay, so let's, all right. We have a questions for Karalyn from Maria Portilla. Thank you for all the interesting information. I have a questions for Karalyn. In your experience, which policy that promotes art is the most common and efficient one lacking in underdeveloped countries?
Thank you for that question. I think even before you get to policy, every country has a national plan for development. And when you look at those plans, the first thing I do is I do a search for the word culture. And every time you find agriculture, but never culture. It's so rare that countries look to culture for their development. And I think that's the first step, is we need to get countries focused on why culture should be in their national plans for development. Of course, we need to have culture policies. That's a weakness in our region. Many countries don't have culture policies, and we're helping them just have their very first policy. Or maybe countries have, 5 or 6 culture policies and not like an overarching one. Maybe they have a document that was adopted, but it's not really implemented. One of the lacunae in this is that the people who the culture policy benefits aren't normally consulted on what it contains. And that dialogue is something that UNESCO, we have, many, we call them conventions, but basically, international legal instruments that give guidance to countries in various fields of culture, whether it be world heritage or intangible heritage. But in 2005, so our very last convention that we've developed, it's focusing on the cultural and creative industries, on the diversity of cultural expressions. It's looking at film, music, theater, dance, poetry, art, all sorts of cultural and creative industry sectors. And how can we encourage countries to support the development of those sectors through their culture policies, through the different measures that they're taking, whether it be international cooperation? So many countries, you see there's a head of state that comes, you see maybe the flags up or whatever, and who knows, maybe there's a car deal or a supermarket, there's some deal. There's always a deal when there's a head of state coming. But how often is that deal including culture? How often is there an exchange? Are we going to take some of your artists and make sure they're at our biennial? Or we're going to, you know, help, oh, we see you've opened a theater. Maybe you need some training in this. We have this well developed in our country. We can have your staff of that theater or that museum come and get training in our country. You know, these kind of peer exchanges or study opportunities, how to get so that if you've got a film made in Lebanon, for example, how can we get these exchanges so we can have more, you know, we can see more films from other countries, but also that our country can produce these films. So I think getting in touch with the people on the ground and finding out what's blocking them. Why aren't they able to produce the films? Why aren't they getting the music recording out there? And how can we overcome it? And then putting that in the vision of the culture policy, so that the action plan of the policy is saying, okay, now these are the things we need to work on. And so through this convention I mentioned, the 2005, we call it convention, the one on the diversity of cultural expressions, we work with countries every 4 years. They're obliged when they've adopted this convention to give a report to UNESCO. And what the report is basically a culture policy review. So a lot of countries before, they would just do it by themselves, but UNESCO is like, no, you've got to get the people together and talk to them about what's working. And it's funny, I saw there was a comment, someone saying, we don't have a way to talk to our government. We found, because I've done this now in about 9 of the 13 countries I've covered. And in the beginning, yeah, you realize there's not a relationship between the government, you know, the ministries responsible for culture and the artists, the actors, you know, the people running the cultural institutions. And through these meetings that UNESCO organizes to look at, you know, what's been done, what's stopping us from getting our, you know, our film sector, or from getting women going in it, or whatever the region, what are the challenges? And then that helps the government see over the next 4 years, what are we going to focus on? So I think this need for really getting this dialogue between the ministry, between the people who are affected, like we're doing, you know, in a way, in a mini way through these ZeeArts, I think that is going to bring this awareness that's needed. And you know, once we can get strong, powerful policies across, once we get culture in the national plans for development, we get indicators showing this contribution, I think culture will take off in the developing countries the way that it already has in developed countries.
Absolutely. So how to bridge the gap in between the government, private sectors, as well artists from the grassroots level. Very powerful. Actually, we're organizing in Mauritius the 2nd edition of Mauritius International Art Fair, which will be held in October. So, as you know, Mauritius is a COVID-free island since 2 months, almost 2 months now. So we are hoping that everything will be okay, but we are also working to have everything online as a virtual exhibition at the same time. And our focus this year will be mainly on Africa, especially. So this is something that we can talk and have.
Yeah. I just will mention, since you're bringing up Mauritius, that in my region, so the Eastern African region and Indian Ocean region, they're the only country so far that has worked towards developing a legislation for status of the artists in line with the 1980 recommendation. So I know that their president, their minister of culture has really taken this under their wing, and the minister of culture has actually agreed to be our keynote speaker at the Africa debate that we're organizing on you know, why it's important for African countries to develop legislation for you know, concerning their artists. He's going to share what Mauritius did and how they're trying to move forward to get this law adopted. So that'll be great when that happens.
Fantastic.
To have the first East African country with this law.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate. We have another questions from Abia Al-Idani. She's an Iraqi artist. Will the creativity industry be affected after the pandemic? And what are the solutions expected from governments if there is an impact? Anybody would like to?
Well,
Rebecca.
well, I think it's already been impacted pretty badly. I think that I guess maybe we have to differentiate between the creative industry and sort of the art market. But if I'm going to talk about the art market, which I presume she's referring to, it's been hit really hard. You know, Freeze in London has just been cancelled 2 days ago officially, which means that, you know, probably 154, the African Contemporary Art Fair, where I've been doing a lot of reporting on African art. I absolutely am in love with it. That means that probably will be also cancelled or, you know, made smaller as well. And that's tough, because not only is it tough for the galleries, it's tough for the artists, it's tough for, like we obviously, you don't need much to create an artwork, but people do need to make money. They do need means of survival. And so it's unfortunately, yeah, I think that we're not only going to see less fairs, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think people were questioning whether the fair model was the right model, but it just means that the whole structure of this art world, rather art industry, became the art industry, is going to completely change. And galleries have been affected, and people are selling art online. And it means that the way that artists are connecting to sell their work, because ultimately they do need to sell their work, they do need to make money, or they do need support or grants or whatever, which, you know, hopefully government, you know, subsidies or government support can adhere to. But I think it's yeah, we haven't seen the end of it. I think the changes have only just started. And but again, going back to this sort of collaboration, also what, you know, Karalyn was saying, maybe the silver lining again will be the trauma, will be the pain, which will force us to be more collaborative. People need to work together, and governments need to work together. So some places like, I think, Germany, the UK, there's been a lot more support for the arts community. Again, really hard, it's been really a hard hit. But on a micro macro, actually, how would you say, I had to moderate a talk for 154 a few weeks ago, and it was on art centers in Africa. You know, independent art centers in Accra, and one in Kampala, another one in South Africa, and, you know, how they're going forward. And again, it comes down to collaboration. So some of these artists are having a really hard time even finding enough food to eat at the moment, because they can't sell their art. So I think that we haven't seen the end of it, and we just really have to work together. There's no other option, actually.
Yes, indeed. We have another question, which is a bit similar to the previous one, but she wrote, it's a questions from Razia, questions to Karalyn. Again, very often the help do not reach the artists, unfortunately, on meritocracy, but connection. Is it possible to make a hub for artists from UNESCO where they can apply independently?
Sorry, my mouse wasn't working to unmute. I'm not sure if I understood 100%. I think they were talking about individual grants to artists, which UNESCO isn't really, there are some, we have a variety of funding mechanisms, especially linked with this 2005 convention. There's the International Fund for Cultural Diversity, Sabrina Ho Fund for Women. We have a variety of funds, but we're really not there as a funding organization for individual artists, and really trying to change things. You know, we have member states from around the world, and we really work with them to try to get, you know, these policies, to try to get measures in place, to try to get the conditions right for the, you know, all of the artists on the ground. But you know, the idea of getting some kind of, you know, grant for artists, some hub, I mean, this has been brought up in various ZeeArts debates. And I know on national level as well, like even here in Kenya, where I'm living, the government created a fund for artists who are affected by this COVID crisis. Granted, it's not a lot. I think it's the equivalent of $1 million. So, I mean, people are complaining that it, you know, that it's not enough, but at least it's something, one step forward, you know, of the realization. But yeah, for UNESCO, I really can't make a reply, because there's not a fund right now, and an individual fund for artists. But this suggestion, I think all of these suggestions that are coming out of these ZeeArts debates, and yours today, because this is a ZeeArts debate, will be put forward as we, you know, as we bring out the outcomes of this debate. So these will be considered and reflected as we look at the future of our work.
Thank you for the photo. I have one statement, if I can say, from Lucia again. It is hard enough to be an artist in the best time. Broadway will go dark for the next year. If the most successful of artists are struggling now, imagine how much the majority of artists are doing. So it's just a feeling from one of the artists. We have talked about, we have 5 minutes more that we can talk. For me, we talk about the government, the different initiatives happening. What about the private sector? What advice or how do you think private sectors can help the artists to sustain or to continue to create what they're doing? Because we have lots of private sectors here, and as part of the CSR initiative, which is the corporate social responsibility, perhaps how they can bring this fund to support the local artists community. So what advice would you have for the private sectors?
I don't see it. Can I speak about it?
Please.
Yeah, I think because as far as Pakistan is concerned and other countries like Pakistan, there have never been any government support on art. So COVID did not really change that situation. It has been always private sector which was on forefront, and still like people are supporting today as well, because I think what you're doing now, what I can advise is that you are investing in future. You're not really investing in present, you are investing in future, because uh, artists are whether they are when we talk about it's hard to survive in these times for artists, I see it's hard to survive for everyone in these times. Artists are not really different from the other sectors of society or the individual of societies. So I think private sectors, though itself is facing a problem, but I feel that having a responsibility towards art, because you, as majority of our panelists have said, that you need art for some. It's an urge. It's like kind of a you cannot really make it a material urge, but there's a kind of psychological or spiritual urge. So our people do need to decorate their walls. People do need to invest in artwork. People do need to invest in what they like. So I think private sector are making funds, or they are like supporting artists. They're buying. I know in Pakistan as well, people are buying work because somehow they don't know what to do these times, how to spend their money and what to do with their time. So it's a kind of a good thing that you buy. Like you search for artists, you locate them, and you like the work, though the galleries are shut. But I know a lot of galleries in Pakistan. They're doing well. They're like selling work, because this is like what else you do in where you cannot really go. So I suppose you invest in future, and probably these times will change and things go back to normal. If they don't really go back to normal, we may learn how to cope with it. And human psyche is like that. We come into the worst situation and we still survive. And if we have something to say, we'll keep on saying it, despite the fact whether we are funded or whether we are not funded as artists or writers.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Kudus. We have one last questions from Razia. But art is political. What about which you can't sell? What about if you can't sell? I don't understand the questions. Anybody?
Let me. I think if all art is political, for some people, I may also believe in that. But the thing is, like, if art is political, you're not really making art to sell. You're making art to communicate, and you may earn your living as a teacher, or you may earn your living having a shop or like doing some other kind of business. So you don't really rely on art. it's a way of communication. If it's going to be, but it's going to change the society. It's going to change the fabric of society. So I think the more you, if you are making political art and you expect it to sell, then there is I see a kind of a hidden paradox or contradiction within the concept.
Great. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If any of you would like to add anything, the time is now. No? Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us for this 5th edition of Art Connect Us. And this initiative today is together in collaboration with, again, the word collaboration is coming many times now, in collaboration with the UNESCO East Africa Office under the Resilient. Thanks a lot, Karalyn. Thanks, Rebecca, Khalil, Kudus. You were amazing panelists. And I would like to thank also all our audience live here, as well as on our Facebook who are interacting. Unfortunately, I cannot respond to both questions. Thanks a lot. Next week, we have our 6th webinar, Art Connect Us. So it's going to be at the same time, same date. So I would like to welcome you all and have a nice weekend. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.